And today I just wanted to come back on the topic of regulation. So thank you very much for asking me the question and bringing the topic earlier. And it's also reminding me, it's good timing actually, because a few years ago I was in Prague at a conference, and it's more or less at this time of the year. Actually, this year it was taking place this week, and I received some nice messages from participants there that I met the years before, and that conference and some other conferences. And the first session I had at the time in the conference when I was speaking in an open on a round table was to talk about regulation. I was not very, let's say, positive about the number of regulations that are upon us and in the insurance industry. But I think my view changed a bit since then, or at least I've sharpened my view. If we take regulation simply as a piece of legislation or at local level in a certain country, or to do business between countries, or because we're based in the EU, we have a lot of EU and EU-related regulation. So it's very easy to start complaining about the number of documents and process norms and regulation we have to implement. And actually, it is the fact in the insurance industry, which is a hyper-regulated market. But if we take a step back and start thinking about regulation, why they are there, and take just like a 360 view, and I'm just going to take the 180 more about the regulation. Let's think about the management of a company, which is start thinking about the strategy and define a North Star for the company, the employees, and all the stakeholders around. That's the first step of regulation. The North Star gives us a direction. And so that direction means that's where we're going to go. This is the focus we're going to have. And we're not going to go left or right or backwards, hopefully. So that's regulation already. The strategy itself is a regulation, or the process that we use, the method that we use to develop the strategy is a regulation. So in a first instance, first step into establishing a strategy, we are defining best practice, which are regulations. So my view, when I took that angle on regulation, my view is slightly different on regulation. And although in the past I've already said that it's very good to know the rules so that we can play by the rules, here I'm just going to even say further than that. We are not subject to those rules. We are also demanding those rules. Of course, we have to put a bit of salt and pepper in all of this, because too much inconsistent rules is going to create more harm than good, and therefore it blurs the whole reality. So if I go back to my initial statement about the North Star, if the reality is blurred, you don't know what the North Star is, and therefore you can just start running a bit awkward in various directions, and that's really bad for your business. Then when you have many regulations and you're implementing them, what you do is you review your whole value chain. And in the value chain itself, you also establish rules, process, norms that define all the steps, that also define how interfaces are working. And when it's working really well, the client feel it. They don't need to know about all that regulation, all those regulations. But at the end of the day, if your value chain is working really well, then the client, who at the end see your product and feels the product, trust your product, then is definitely going to experience a higher quality than if those regulations had not been there. We always complain about regulation anyway, so let me be very clear. All the positive I just said now, they are very constraining, they're very demanding, they cost a lot of money. They also create a lot of frustration when we are establishing and implementing those. Well, first, before implementing them. We also have to analyze them and see what impact it has on us as a whole industry, then and on us as an insurance company wherever we're located. And based on my experience, it's never a very fun topic. But once it's implemented, then, or in the implementation phase towards the end, then we can start seeing the benefit of such a regulation. And we're very happy when it's finished. But being in an industry, in a continent where regulation happened to be a strategy, a defense mechanism, and then I'm sure that today in Brussels at this time, in Brussels, Paris, Frankfurt, or wherever in Europe, there's a gentleman or a lady thinking about a regulation. What can we do to regulate better, to change something which is not perfect? And this person doesn't know me, I don't know him or her. But in 2 years' time, or 3 years' time maybe, we will see the result of that thinking process that is probably going to come at some point to a project and a regulation implemented, a set of law or circular letter or norms or whatever. So that's something that I expect. That today is the level of regulation is very heavy. Tomorrow is not going to change. The creativity in regulation is as high as the creativity that we can use on the market, in sales, in marketing, in AI, without AI. So that's not going to change. That's very, very clear for me. What I think about the insurance industry, though, is twofold. My take on that is insurers have been under regulation for a very long time. So the companies, groups are used to implementing regulation. The processes are there. The stress is not there anymore. Like when there's a new regulation coming up or something unexpected, then management and companies react very negatively to change. I mean, management, although they promote change, sometimes when change comes upon them, they also have resistance to change because there's uncertainty. It's going to cost money. It's going to impact the financial plans, the sales plans, short-term, long-term possibly. So there's a lot of stress that goes with that. What I see in the insurance industry is that stress is less there than in other industries. You remember the discussion we had with Neil in London about the movie industry and the similarities, but also the differences. I think the movie industry is much more adverse to regulation than insurance. So if they receive regulations, they will be much less prepared than the insurers into analyzing them, thinking about where do I need to implement them, what it means, the efficiency in implementing them, the accommodation of such a regulation in the financial plan in the short and long term. So in a hyper-regulated industry, we're just like, another piece of regulation? Almost, that's fine. We're used to it. Of course, we don't react always like that, but it's just we're better prepared to what's coming. So that's very good. There's also, for insurers, and what I'm going to talk about is because all my career I've done international business, always from one country to another country, from a group center to many other countries. And my clients were always client located somewhere and buying somewhere else, or willing to look for international multi-country solutions. So in that environment, you don't talk about one single piece of regulation. It's not, I know my market, I master my market, I know what my client wants, I talk to them, and I know exactly the whole constraining regulatory governance environment. In the international business, you never consider one piece of law. You need to consider several pieces of legislation. And you're never a specialist. You can be a specialist in international business, that's one thing. But wherever you go in a country, you're always a step behind those local specialists. So you need to take a different angle when you approach the market. You need to take a more holistic approach. You need to be forgiving to yourself, and you need to rely also on a lot of feedback. But one thing is clear, is that the complexity is not being less, although you're a step behind. It's extra complexity. You need to understand what your constraints are upon you, and the constraints upon the sales and your client, or the product that you sell to your client. There's a very fine line between where you are and the legislation upon you, and where you sell the legislation about your client. So, and although it looks blurry, but it's very clear the steps of what is legislation of one part is and the other part is. If you know that, if you master that, then the international business that you bring, what you offer to your client, is of higher quality, and there is no blurry element here. It's very clear. And in international business, clarity about regulation, clarity about the regulation that's upon you and upon your client is the key factor for success. If you master that, the clarity, you don't need to be the expert, but the clarity must be there. Once you master that, as I said, then you have improved very strongly your chances of success.